My name is Keith Kreischer. I'm the Executive Director of the IMC, and I'm going to bring in our first panel in just a few seconds. But first, a quick word about the IMC. We are a trade association for the IoT sector. We have 28,000 rank and file members who are enterprise users, product makers and designers, and apps developers that deploy IoT solutions. Our board of governors is made up of roughly 35 of the most influential IoT solutions providers, and we look at today's sessions on IoT and embedded technology as exactly in keeping with our mission of accelerating the adoption of IoT technology. So with that, I'm going to introduce my first moderator. That is Jim Morrish. Jim is one of the principals at Transforma Insights, long-time and well-known analyst in the IoT sector. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, thank you. Good to join you all. I'm not the main event, though. So this first panel, I will be joined by Jose Sanchez, Director of Product Marketing for IoT Services at Telit, and Marc Sauter, who is Head of IoT Project Management at Vodafone, and also Olaf Schneider, who is Portfolio Strategy Manager at Giesecke+Devrient. So welcome, guys. And the topic for this is iSIM in embedded design. And just to provide a little more background on that, iSIM, or Integrated Subscriber Identity Module, and its impact on embedded design. It's going to enable smaller form factors and enhance flexibility in designing connected devices, and it's going to revolutionize many industries, including IoT, particularly wearables and automotive. So we're going to cover those topics today. What I should do, though, is start off with an introductory question, which is, what is eSIM? Marc.
Right. So, look, eSIM, from our perspective, is just a capability to switch the operator profile over the air on a SIM card, and that can be applied to any SIM type, whether that's a physical SIM or something else. And that's done over the air through a process that's called remote SIM provisioning. And that's a really cool thing, because previously, you had to go and replace the SIM card and put a new SIM card in, which was very costly and very, a lot of effort required, very complex. And today, with the embedded SIM, you can simply switch from one operator to the other over the air without physically replacing the SIM. So that's the eSIM. Then, obviously, our panel today is about the iSIM,
exactly,
which is the integrated SIM, and an eSIM can run on an iSIM.
Exactly.
You have another question on iSIM.
Exactly. That's the next part of the question. There's two elements to this question. Just two elements to this, because there's eSIM, as Marc says, that's about provisioning credentials remotely, and then you've got the iSIM, which is a matter of the format of what it's provisioned onto. So, a person to talk about that, I'd have thought a good person would be Olaf. So, what about the different form factors? We've got SIM cards, we've got SIM chips, we've got iSIM, we've got also.
Okay. A little bit loud. Maybe before we go into the differences of these different form factors, let's see what is the same for all the form factors. Yeah? It is basically an operating system that we need to authenticate to a network. Yeah? And it needs to protect those credentials of the network and identify a subscriber and authenticate to the network. This is the same for all of the form factors. Yeah? So why are there different form factors? So it's a history of market demand. In the beginning, a SIM was just an entry ticket for cellular connectivity. So in the beginning, we had something like this and had to put this into our phones. Soon, there was a requirement for miniaturization. So smartphones got smaller and smaller and smaller, and we all know there was a 2FF form factor, there was a 3FF form factor, there's a 4FF form factor. In fact, G&D was the one introducing the 2FF form factor and did the first commercial SIM delivery back in 1991 with 300 pieces. So the second wave of requirement was to put cellular connectivity into cars. So here the game is different, because the requirement from that industry was that the SIM has to be soldered onto a PCB. Now, if you solder something on a PCB, you cannot take it out and change the operator by just putting another SIM in there. That's not possible anymore. So with that requirement, also there was a requirement for remote manageability of that. And along came new form factors because it had to be smaller than MFF2 form factor, which is still standardized, and also non-standardized form factors like waiver, level, chip, scale, package. That's not standardized anymore. So the third wave of requirements was that in IoT there are certain use cases and devices that require something else. They require basically more sustainability. They need to run maybe in devices that are battery driven. And also there is not even maybe space for a SIM card anymore. There's not enough space for a plug-in or for MFF2. So that means that we have to put the SIM also still onto a secure element, but not an extra physical component. It is put into the chipset that is anyway part of the device. And with that, an iSIM is still a SIM. The functionality, the core functionality to authenticate and identify a subscriber to the network is still the same, but the form factor changes with the requirements from the market.
Great, thank you. So there's kind of a couple of parallel changes there going on together. First, eSIM, which means you can change SIM credentials remotely. There's also iSIM, the ever-decreasing size of the SIM, and in fact disappearing to being a software package. And when these two things are combined, you can have exceptionally small devices on which you can change the SIM credentials and provision the SIM credentials remotely. No SIMs, no actual physical SIM cards required. So these two things work together and unlock some pretty significant potential. Jose, perhaps you want to expand on some of the advantages of iSIM.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Well, Olaf, I think already mentioned a couple of them. I think iSIM is also about enabling new applications, enabling new possibilities. And why is it that? Well, we mentioned already size, of course, size constraints, space constraints. That's, I think, probably the most obvious of all benefits. There is definitely also a benefit or potential benefit in terms of cost, overall cost of the package. But one has to also think about the processes, right? The end-to-end processes that come along with iSIM that are different, right? And there are other benefits in terms of energy consumption. We mentioned that. Battery-operated applications obviously need efficient components, and the SIM is one of those components. And it's typically been a little bit neglected when it comes to power consumption. So now with iSIM, I think this is where it comes to the forefront and enables long-lasting devices. It's one of the components that contributes to that longevity. I think those are probably the most relevant benefits that we
I think so. So there's some pretty relevant advantages there. There's some new things that you can do with the SIM. There's some new places you can put it. There's more flexibility. So there's a lot of advantages. So I want to come back to you, Marc. What segments and verticals do you see most demand coming from for this new iSIM concept?
As we just explained, iSIM comes with very significant benefits, and if you then combine iSIM with LPWA, then actually, it really puts the strength on and the rubber hits the road, because with LPWA you can create devices with very low power consumption, where the battery needs to be very small, long longevity. And also, often LPWA devices are much smaller than other devices, and also the cost comes into play, right? So you marry the two things, and then actually you can benefit from these advantages. And therefore, we see a lot of use cases today where we have iSIM combined with LPWA, and that opens up a complete new business, lots of new business opportunity, lots of use cases that are possible with that combination. We see a lot of that in track and trace, where you can, for example, have a smart label that is attached to a parcel or whatever, and then you can really track that from production to the retailer to the end consumer. We also see a lot in the medical space with medical devices and medical wearables. Again, size, power consumption, cost matters here, and then you combine that. So we see a lot of action here. And then when we also look at that combination, LPWA and iSIM, I think tries another advantage. We talked about, lower power consumption, less components, so that's also a sustainability aspect. to that. And for example, with the IoT cases that we in Vodafone enabled last year, we roughly saved 30 million tons of CO2 emission, which is more than some European countries have throughout the year. And with LPWA and iSIM together, that will even increase going forward.
Okay, so there's a lot of benefits with this new technology or this new approach, particularly things that need to be really small and really cheap, and LPWA connectors. So that track and trace example you gave, I think a connected shipping label effectively, which sends out a ping when it's been opened. Those kind of applications, incredibly valuable. But it's going to change some of the processes for designing and producing products. Jose, do you want to comment on how IoT OEMs production processes are going to have to change?
Yeah, that's a great question and not so easy to answer actually. Processes today, it's relatively simple. Your OEM buys a SIM card from one of the operators, inserts the SIM card or solders the SIM cards onto a device, right? Tomorrow with iSIM, there is a slightly different process, and that's where OEMs need to be also aware and ready that the processes are going to change. And there is usually a module vendor in between, which needs to integrate the, let's say, the cellular chipset, baseband, and that process will just change basically because it will not be two components anymore that the OEM needs to source, but only one. So today we see that already with some modules embedding physical SIMs inside the module itself. So that means that the OEM would probably, have options in terms of at which point of the manufacturing or the supply chain provision the operator profile. So it could be either the module vendor doing that on the OEM behalf, or it could be the OEM doing it itself. So basically, I see here also differences happening between, based on the size of the project. If we want iSIM to really scale beyond, very large-scale projects, really go into the, let's say, mid-size IoT projects, we need to simplify the processes. We need to make it possible for either module vendors or OEMs to actually provision connectivity easily, right?
Okay, so there will definitely be changes, and scale plays into that. Whether it's worth, how much is worth investing, and whether it's worth investing. But it's clear that there are going to be sustainability benefits, and it's clear that some aspects are going to be of making a device and designing a device are going to be simpler because it's a virtual element on a chip, not a physical SIM in a SIM holder. So, Olaf, do you want to expand a little on the aspects of the production of cellular devices that you think are going to be simpler, and also what some of the sustainability benefits might be?
Yeah, happy to do so. So at G&D, we believe that digital products make production or manufacturing easier and more sustainable, right? And the iSIM is a digital product. So what does it mean? The iSIM is a software package that needs to be downloaded onto a secure, tiny piece of element in the chipset. Yeah? Like from our point of view, like a firmware that needs to be downloaded in the manufacturing process anyway at some time. So, but unlike a plastic SIM or an embedded SIM that are still extra physical components that need to be sourced, an iSIM is, as that, a software package. So there are benefits for the production, like you don't have to have a physical SIM supply chain anymore. You don't have to ship cards from one place to the other. You don't have to store them in warehouses, and you don't have to do any stock keeping. You don't have to worry if it's still available or not, and if someone can find that SIM card of the operator that is meant to go into that particular batch of device. And I think this is one of the biggest benefits, actually, that you actually do not have to insert that iSIM into a device during production. That is mostly done manually, which is error-prone and also needs a lot of time compared to a software download. Yeah? So I think these are the benefits that we see as a SIM card provider. On the sustainability front, we just need to look a little bit differently at basically what I just said. plastic SIM and an embedded SIM is an extra physical component that sits on a piece of silicon with a considerable size. If you don't need that anymore, you actually save a lot of material, especially the rare earth metals that are very high in demand. There's for sure no plastic anymore because you do not deliver ID1 card anymore. And of course, there is no global shipment of SIM cards. That is a huge sustainability advantage because the SIM card production may be happening in one continent and the actual assembling of the device in another. So that's why we think iSIM is a SIM as good as any other else, and it's a sustainable one. So I think there are benefits that we need to exploit.
So it's clear there's a lot of benefits here, both in terms of commercially, in terms of efficiency, in terms of sustainability. So in many ways, iSIM does seem a lot better solution than the previous SIM-based solutions, but it's a lot of change. And one of the things you can say about inserting a SIM is it is incredibly simple, and OEMs have set themselves up to perform that very simple task of putting a SIM in. So they're going to have to prepare themselves. They're going to have to deal with this new iSIM environment, which is around more digitally based certification and assigning those certificates. So Jose, can you give me your thoughts on how OEMs should prepare themselves for some of these changes that the iSIM will herald?
Yes, sure. I mean, first thing is, of course, you have to talk to the ecosystem. There's not a single player today that can give you a solution out of hand. I mean, there's you're buying a module from a module vendor, you're buying connectivity from your operator, you're buying a SIM card. Then you need to talk to them. You actually need to align and ensure that there is alignment for your application and your use case. I think that you need to think about upfront, need to think about what we mentioned before, the production processes, how the production process is going to change if there is going to be a change. And also, and that's also important, need to think about the business model, right? So you need to understand the business model, by talking to the different entities and ensure that you have a clear view of your costs when you're moving to iSIM, which is, to me, one of the most relevant questions today.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to shift gear a little bit and talk about standardization and security. I mean, these are universally important concepts in IoT and also in cellular telecommunications. But it strikes me that in an iSIM world, both standardization and security are going to be more of a premium, they're going to be more important. So can you provide some thoughts around how important these things are and why, Marc?
Yeah, look, from our perspective, standardization and security were one of the key factors for the huge success of our industry, right? I mean, with standardization, you can create economies of scale. You can make sure that things are compatible, even though they come from various suppliers. The customers, the consumers have a broad selection of choice in terms of suppliers, form factors, different types, and so on and so forth. So a huge success journey based on that standardization and high level of security. And therefore, from our perspective, everything we do with iSIM should follow these success criteria. So we as Vodafone put a lot of effort in making sure that the iSIM is as secure as the traditional physical SIM, whether that's a plastic SIM or the SIM chip that you solder onto a device. So we don't make any compromise here because the SIM is a very important component in an overall solution, that provides the security, the authentication. So therefore, we don't want to make any compromise here and take any risks there, right? Then as well, the standardization, super important because, Jose, you mentioned the ecosystem. Right, there is no single supplier out there or a company out there that can provide the various components on their own, right? So need to work together with the hardware manufacturers, the module manufacturers, the chip manufacturers, the SIM OS providers, the mobile network operators, and only when you can create that standardization, and the GSMA is doing a good job there, and I think we're all part of any GSMA specification activities. So therefore, that's, I think, super important, and that the entire ecosystem and that the companies that are part of that ecosystem, that they make sure that the components they work on follow that GSMA standardization, the GSMA specifications, and the GSMA certification.
Yeah, absolutely. it makes a lot of sense to be completely standardized and aligned and make sure that everyone's just working the same ways and all the systems connect properly. Spinning out a little and thinking, Olaf, more around a wider sense of security, like an OS security. I guess that's pretty important for a secure iSIM as well. What are your thoughts on secure OS?
Definitely. So G&D is in the SIM card business for over 30 years, and I think with Vodafone we have a standing relationship since 2001 or even earlier. I can't remember anymore. So G&D is very close to the operators, and we are listening to their requirements. And the requirements that we see that are coming from the operators are threefold. One is when they want to, or let me say, if they want to use an iSIM, it needs to have the same security like a traditional SIM, like a plastic SIM or like an embedded SIM. And with it come three requirements. The first one is an iSIM needs to run on a secure element. The second one is an operating system needs to comply to all the relevant SIM standards, ETSI, GSMA. And the third one is an operating system has to be hard enough to protect the network and the network credentials, which is one of the most valuable things of the operators, against all known attacks and possibly against future attacks. So when we look at iSIM now, iSIM will have its first role in IoT. And IoT is the biggest machine that we will ever build. So my former CEO, Carsten Arendt, said, let's make it secure. So what does this mean? In IoT, there will be use cases or devices that need cellular connectivity that comes from the MNOs, but cannot be addressed with the existing form factors. And iSIM is the solution for that. Because now the MNO has a chance to address this part of the IoT market with cellular connectivity because he knows the network credentials and the network is protected as if it was a traditional SIM. And with that, G&D makes the IoT secure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Makes a lot of sense. So we're down to the last couple of minutes now. I'd just like to sort of wrap up on what you think the next steps might be. So the next steps in improvements of iSIM or to aid the adoption or anything really around the iSIM space. Marc, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, I'm more than happy. Look, from our perspective, it's super important that we educate the market and explain to the players in the market the benefits that an iSIM brings, specifically in combination with LPWA, and just, also outline what additional use cases we can jointly address, because this will significantly increase the addressable market for all players in that market. And it also drives significant benefit for society. We just talked about the sustainability aspects earlier. So therefore, education, super important. Then we need to enlarge the ecosystem, right? That we have more players so that the consumers and the customers have more choice, and really make sure that as an industry or an ecosystem that we follow that standardization and security process to really simplify those things and make it simple also from a process perspective. So the ecosystem, very important that the partners work closely together.
Okay. Jose, your thoughts on what needs to happen next to really make sure iSIM is adopted and the full potential is realized?
Yeah, it goes a bit along the lines of what Marc mentioned. At Telit Cinterion, what we would like is to actually, simplify and make it easy for customers to adopt iSIM, right? Yeah. We don't want to be just one burden in the middle. We'd like to actually make it simple. So be it allowing our customers to provision eSIM with the operator of the choice, or providing modules with preloaded connectivity. It doesn't matter. In the end, I think the next step will be to actually implement those standards, those specs that have been already defined, and really go in the next level and explain to our customers those processes and the business models, right, that are coming along with those processes, and how they are going to be able to, leverage eSIM easily. That's, I think, the next step we have to take. Yeah.
How to unlock the advantage. Final thoughts, Olaf, on...
Also from our side, what we think where iSIM can play a very important role is, like we do, we combine it with cellular satellite connectivity. Because chances are that these devices that are battery driven are somewhere remote or rural, where there is no terrestrial network and where is the support of a satellite required. And ETSI has adapted specifications so that there's cellular technology provided by satellite providers. So I think this is very important. Then along your lines, we need to educate the market, we need to drive the iSIM into the market. We have already a commercial product that we are selling, but we need to, of course, together with our partners, the MNOs and the OEMs, educate the customers and find new projects and make it bigger. Last but not least, I think it is very important to make the iSIM remote SIM provisioning able. Yeah? So far it's one profile on the iSIM that needs to change because IoT providers, they want to have the opportunity to change over the years the connectivity provider, and we need to put this capability into the iSIM. And this is on the road, and I think this is coming, and I think this is the big breakthrough for iSIM.
Okay, fantastic. I'm afraid we've run out of time. It's a really interesting conversation, but I would like to say thank you very much to Jose, Marc, and Olaf for this. I hope you found the discussion interesting, everybody out there, and thank you for joining us.